Hello and welcome to the G5 Hive and our next installment of our Worker Bee series, where we deep dive into G5 college football landscape with the folks that know the teams the best. If you are watching on YouTube, please hit that like and subscribe button. And if you are listening in podcast form, please rate and review 5 stars only. Today, we will be taking a look at the Middle Tennessee Blue Raiders, who finished 4-8 in 2023, and they recently wrapped up their 2024 spring practice with their spring game on April 13th. We have a special guest joining us today. Please welcome to the show Jake Bolden, the host of the Blue Raider podcast and sports contributor for the Main Street Media. Jake can be found at Blue Raider Pod on X. Welcome to the show, Jake.
Thanks for having me, guys. I appreciate it.
All right. Well, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what led you to being interested in sports reporting and covering the Blue Raiders?
Yeah, so going through college, actually, I grew up in Murfreesboro, and if anyone knows the landscape of athletics here in Tennessee, you're either a Volunteers fan or you're not. And so myself being born and raised in Murfreesboro, I guess by virtue of proximity, I was always an MTSU fan. I always went to MTSU sporting events since I was a baby. And so I went to the university here, and by the only way to kind of put myself through college at the time was doing part-time jobs, and that involved doing a little bit of journalism. And so obviously I cover the team that I loved, working for Main Street Media, as you already introduced me as. And so I did high school sports growing up, and then I just got stuck doing MTSU stuff. And then from then on, that passion of writing and now kind of having a different medium that is doing podcasting, I just kind of fell in love with doing it this way. I think written word is great, but I love the podcasting scene. I love the connections it's brought me, as well as, you guys here at the G5 Hive and what's going on with the college huddle. It's been great with what this has afforded me as just a journalist and kind of my own passion project, if you will. So in short, I love MTSU because that's where I was born and raised. I don't know anything better. And I look way better in blue than I do in orange.
Well, speaking of some changes and a guy that was there a long time, for the first time in, I guess, 18 years, you guys will have a new head coach leading the charge. Gone is longtime head coach Rick Stockstill. In comes Derek Mason, who was most recently the defensive coordinator for Oklahoma State, but was also the Vanderbilt head coach from 2014 to 2020. What can you tell us about Coach Mason and what he brings to the table for Middle Tennessee?
Well, if there's anything you want to know about Coach Mason, he's an open book. And that's one thing that if you follow MTSU in any capacity on social media, you're going to find Derek Mason plastered all over it. And that's something that MTSU fans haven't had for 2 decades with Stockstill. He was kind of a guy that worked in the shadows a lot. And not to say that, there's different ways to skin that cat. But one thing that has helped tremendously with the support of MTSU out the gates in regards to Derek Mason is his upfrontness. I like to use the word transparency whenever I interviewed our athletic director. I think that that's something that he's trying to be a little bit more open about, because with Stockstill, as we all know, football is the moneymaker. And with Stockstill, he didn't have the personality that was boisterous, outgoing, in your face, whereas Mason, he's kind of talked that talk. I mean, he had his experience at Vanderbilt. He did his coordinating stint, and then he took his break there, going to broadcasting on the SEC network. And now that he's here in Murfreesboro, it just seems like it's a guy that is trying to get his legs back under him and live that head coaching lifestyle, if you will. So for him, it's a breath of fresh air for a lot of us, because again, we've had that reserve coach. He has set a lot of expectations for himself. I mean, his reputation precedes him because of where he was at Vanderbilt. And again, we're all pretty familiar with Vanderbilt here in the mid-state. It's a hard place to win. And many would say the same thing about MTSU because of whether it's our facilities that are finally being upgraded. A lot of people would say they wouldn't hold it against Stockstill because of where the facilities were, and they are behind. But we're finally getting a $66 million student athlete performance center that includes an indoor football practice facility, all new like study areas for the athletes, a whole new locker room, all new suites for fans. There's a lot that's going in place. It's kind of spearheading with this coaching change. And so Derek Mason's done a great job as far as being an advocate for the university, as well as all these changes that we're seeing. And so it literally is like turning a new leaf after, seeing Stockstill go after 20 years.
And as typical with when one head coach leaves, another hires most of their assistants when they come into these new roles. One is for the offensive coordinator position that came in. Coach Mason hires Bodie Reeder, who is most recently the Northern Iowa offensive coordinator, not too far from where I live, but he's going to be running that Blue Raiders offense. What can you describe this new look Blue Raider offense for the listeners?
The best way to look at it, if anyone's watched MTSU football, you know that it's been the air raid offense. Tony Franklin was a longtime offensive coordinator. He's been removed since 2020, but the air raid offense was kind of here to stay for a while after his tenure. You see a lot of spread, 4 outs. You're going to have one quarterback, one running back. Very seldomly use a tight end in any sort of situation. So to put it in technical terms, you're going to see a lot of 11 and 12 personnel. But gosh, the one thing that I love to see is a quarterback under center. I love the pistol and I love the shotgun, but something that we saw at the spring game was, so we actually had a quarterback go under center, and just kind of the ironic reaction of the press box that afternoon was that there was a quarterback going under center. We haven't seen that in 10 years. So that was kind of a cool thing to see. But one thing that I think is interesting about Bodie Reeder's offense is his utilization of the tight ends. And I know we'll talk more about personnel coming up, but he with those 11 and 12 personnels, he's going to shift a lot of those tight ends into the slot. He uses them on a lot of level concepts. He spreads the field out vertically, whereas with the air raid offense and us being undersized, we've utilized a lot of the horizontal passing game, which has stunted our ability to run the football. So he's spreading the field out more vertically than we've ever seen, despite moving away from the air raid offense and the spread. And again, as we'll touch on here in a little bit, I'm sure is the running game. The running game is just we're hoping to finally get out of the bottom dwelling of Conference USA and finally see the run game take off.
All right, let's get to the position where it all starts on offense, and that is the quarterback. They return a pretty good quarterback. Last year's starter, Nicholas Fatiato. Kind of how did he look in the spring, and was he comfortable in the new offense?
Absolutely. And I think going into it, a lot of us, we had our suspicions that there might be a quarterback battle between Vadiato and the Gold Coast Community College transfer Luther Richardson, who's from Nashville. But given what we saw at the spring game, there's no doubt that Vadiato is going to be the number one this year. He looked extremely comfortable, to answer your question there, Justice. He was 15 to 16 passing, over 228 yards. He had a touchdown pass in that game. So I'm extremely impressed with Vadiato. He doesn't seem to have missed a beat, seems to fit in perfectly well into Bodie Reeder's offense, and he seems to click pretty well with Derek Mason. And for the most part, a lot of his key weapons have returned. So I don't think that he's going to miss a beat this year. I do anticipate him being top of the conference again in passing, much like he has been in years past. So a lot to like about Vadiato and what he brings to the table.
So you mentioned Luther Richardson, who they bring in from Golden West Junior College, who also, I believe, before that was at Cincinnati for a short period. They returned Stone Frost, and they had a true freshman early enrollee, Roman Gagliano, as well. Kind of how did those guys look this spring, and kind of did anyone step up to kind of assume that backup role?
Is with Roman coming in as a freshman, he kind of already caught the eye of a lot of MTSU fans for other reasons off the football field. Just a fun story about Roman. The Lady Raiders, they had their Conference USA championship down in Huntsville, and Derek Mason shipped all the players down to Huntsville, a little hour-and-a-half drive to watch the ladies play in the championship game. And as a part of the halftime show, Gagliano hit a half-court shot to win a 3 nights vacation in like a Florida resort or something like that. So a lot of us got introduced to Gagliano before we ever saw him put pads on. But really, what surprised a lot of us at the spring game was that Roman actually took the first snaps for his team ahead of Richardson. Gagliano, he's still an incoming freshman. He has all the tools that you would think a quarterback would need. He just still has kind of those freshman legs about him, if you will. He's got a great arm. He's able to spread the field vertically, as I've already spoken on, much like Vadiato. Still a little hesitant with the ball. I think that's more of a comfort thing, more so than anything else. I mean, he is a true freshman, and he's going to be sitting behind Richardson, who has a year of college level experience, than Vadiato, who's been playing there what feels like 10 years, but he's got 3 years of experience himself. So I expect Roman to kind of take the reins in a couple years. To go back on Richardson, the guy has all the tools. He has the size. He's got a better arm objectively than Vadiato. That doesn't always necessarily equate to being a better quarterback, but he definitely has that vertical threat that you're looking for that can really spread teams out. But Richardson would be a great backup. And in years past, we've seen MTSU go down in regards to the quarterback position. We tend to run in the past with the air raid offense, and having such a small offensive line, it's forced quarterbacks to move and use their feet. And we know Vadiato is very comfortable with that. And that's why that dual threat aspect that he has makes him so tough to defenses. Richardson's not quite as mobile. That's something that we'd have to keep an eye on in regards to where his development comes when Vadiato finally graduates. But I do think Richardson would be the next to the throne after Vadiato, and I was impressed again with what his arm talent is. But there's still a lot of question marks in regards to his playmaking ability, because in the spring game, it's the most comfortable I've ever seen him, which is always good. You'd rather see your best ball when the lights come on. His reps in practice aren't necessarily those that'll make you stand out, which is why I think Gagliano might have earned that start in the spring game. But when the lights came on, Richardson looked very, very comfortable. And to be quite honest with everybody and those that may be scouting Richardson out, he could very easily be a starter for one of the 136 teams this next year. So I hate to say it, and I hate that that's the landscape of football, but he's a guy that could certainly get nabbed up given the kind of tape that we were able to see on him in the spring game.
Gagliano, how would you describe his style of play? Is it more like Vadiato? Does he have some mobility, or is he more a pocket passer like Richardson?
It's tough to kind of, I would say, I would, if I had to lean one way more than the other, it's more of a Richardson type. He's definitely more of a pocket passer. Now in high school, he has the legs, he can move. I would say he's just as fast as Vadiato is. So I'm sure he has that elusiveness. The only problem with my evaluation is I've only seen him in pads and touch practice.
Sure.
So he's never had to make that run, if you know what I mean, where
Gotcha.
again, like in the spring game, it's a touch tackle. So it's hard to say what he's capable of. Because there are times where it seems like in the spring game, he kind of forced the issue with some of his passes. But I think that's more of a virtue of they're trying to get him to stay in the pocket and make a little bit more of a mature decision with the ball. So, but
Sure.
I think there's a lot of promise with him and seeing where his development goes.
All right, moving on to the running game, which you kind of mentioned had its struggles there in 2023. They do return just about everyone, including Jaden Cradle, Frank Peasant, Terry Wilkins, and Jaquil Middlebrook, and then they bring in Brian Bruton from Connecticut. Was Coach Reeder able to install his desire for that physical run game this spring, and how did that group look in the spring?
Yeah, it's the group collectively looked good. We didn't see very many reps from Frank Peasant and Jaden Credle. Mostly, I think that's a volume thing. That's going to be a running back by committee, as it always has been. But you mentioned about how bad, or you put it eloquently, but I'll say the run game has been bad, and it has been bad for some time. I think we've been under 125 yards a game since 2019. Bottom of the conference every single year in that span. So it's not a surprise. I think a lot of that has to do with the personnel on the offensive line. We've always been, for the most part, undersized, but it also is a part of the scheme when it comes to offense. But with the run game now, I saw a lot of promise with Jace Gardner and Raymond Banner. Those are guys that Raymond Banner is actually a local talent from Laverne High School, a kid that's very physical. Jace Gardner is a transfer in from California, another kid that is very, very physical running the football. There's a lot of promise about guys like that. Something about Frank Peasant and Flip Credle that makes them such desirable in regards to the run game in the past is their ability to just put their head down and run over people. We don't really have shifty running backs, if you will. We have guys that are more of your hard nose, or as Coach Mason would call them, blue collar type athletes, where these guys are willing to, dig their toes in and go head to head in an old style Oklahoma type drill kind of thing. So the run game is definitely physical. I think that now that we're venturing out of the air raid, that we'll actually see a resurgence, if you will, from the run game, and it could be from any of those guys. One thing that I would say with being a running back by committee, it could be any guy on any given night. And surely 3 or 4 guys are going to touch the ball, a handful of times every night.
So how do you think that split works out? Like 50-50 with 2 guys, 3 or 4 guys work in there. And it's what do you think that percentage is? I'm
not too well versed on Bodie Reeder and his style, but I can tell you from years past, given just last year for that matter, Frank Peasant and Flip Credle. Flip, it's always the hot hand, to kind of answer your question in short. Flip kind of got the hot hand there in the middle of the year. And from that point on, it kind of seemed to be his baby. And then we had a few carries with Peasant, and you'd roll in some of your depth pieces from there. If I had to put a number on it, I would say that Peasant and Credle are probably going to get 70% of your carries. And then where I saw in the spring game, you could get Banner and Gardner thrown in there in kind of that 30% role. But it's still, I don't know how much tape of Bodie Reader he's been putting out. So that's why I say that. I saw a lot of 11 and 12 personnel. Again, we saw some snaps under center, so it could be anything. But I would say confidently 70% would go to Peasant and Krettel.
The passing game does lose some returning production at wide receiver. They lose Elijah Metcalf off to Marshall, Justin Olson to Charlotte, and DJ England Chisholm, Jake Dobson, and Jeremy Tate Jr. all graduated. But you bring in a lot of talent as well. You get the addition of Amari Kelly coming over from Auburn, Jamarian Carter from Vanderbilt, and then you also return Javonte Sherman, Kellen Stewart, and others from last year. How did that wide receiver room shape up this spring?
Right. The transfer portal taketh, right, and it giveth. And so for us, we lost a lot of guys in that transfer portal, but the biggest pickup for us is going to be Omari Kelly from Auburn. Going to be one of the more highest ranked prospects MTSU has ever brought in regards to high school. Didn't get a lot of reps at Auburn, but man, the guy just has the it factor. MTSU, for the most part, we have some good history in regards to wide receivers. The most recent would be Richie James, who just won a Super Bowl. So he kind of has that talent ability where he can make a catch in traffic. He's got a way with his body to have great sideline awareness. He's a guy that I would pinpoint as being a huge X factor for this team in regards to how far they can really go. There's a few pieces in there that could definitely change how far this passing game can really go. But if you're looking at a scouting report on MTSU, it's got to be Omari Kelly. He's got to be your number one priority. He's more than likely going to draw a lot of help on the top side from safeties. He's definitely a vertical threat, one of the faster, if not the fastest we've got on roster right now. Gamarian Carter is another guy that we haven't quite seen him make that leap just yet, but he's got all the physical attributes that you're looking for in a wide receiver. He's got the speed, he's got the vertical. It's just the playmaking ability. We haven't quite seen that opportunity yet, and maybe that's just what it is. The reps aren't quite there yet, but yeah, if you're looking for a receiver in particular, it's Omari Kelly. And if he's not first team Conference USA, I would be stunned.
Yeah, he's certainly got a lot of buzz this spring, a lot of good press. Certainly looks like the wide receiver one in that Bodie Reader offense. Who else would you maybe think that would join him in that starting wide receiver roles?
Really, I would say as far as the wide receivers, it's tough to say. Like I said, Gamarian Carter is kind of a guy that you would think would hop in that spot given his talent abilities. I mean, he's an SEC talent. Guys don't end up on SEC rosters by accident. So he's a guy that you'd like to see kind of step up in that role. I think with what we saw from the spring game is, as I touched on earlier, was the utilization of tight ends. Holden Willis, who was our leading receiver last year, is now stepped into the tight end role. And so with him, we saw him split out into slot stuff. We saw him split out wide to the numbers. We saw him, again, he had his finger in the dirt. He could be a guy that could play anywhere in regards to the receiving side of the offense. And he's our leading production along with Javonte Sherman. So those two guys, it depends on how you want to look at our offense and where they actually fit. But I would see Holden Willis as being a continued threat, someone that can take off some of that pressure that Kelly's going to feel. Javonte Sherman's another guy that has sure hands, has a lot of experience playing at MTSU that could kind of be helpful for getting that pressure off Kelly.
Yeah, happy to hear that about Sherman. He was someone I kind of had high hopes for last year. It didn't really seem to pan out, but I mean, I thought he had a good spring last year. So glad to hear he might be making an impact this year.
So, in talking about Holden Willis, and talking about the shift and kind of how the offense is going to be, he was kind of a hybrid tight end wide receiver last year, and now he's making that move. I guess you would say to tight end, but is anything really changing from his? I guess I don't want to say maybe production standpoint.
Yeah, you'd have to think he's going to be sharing a lot more of those receptions now that you're going to put him down on the line, make him a 6-man, a chip blocker, if you will, because that's kind of his style. He's a wide receiver out of high school. He's always been a wide receiver. The thing that puts him in the category of a hybrid, as you put it, is just his size. He's not necessarily going to be that wide receiver skinny type, if you will. He's kind of a girthy, big guy. So he has those broad shoulders. That's going to put him in that category of being utilized multiple ways. Production, I do fully anticipate it to drop, but he will get a lot more receptions than the average tight end in the Division I. If that does kind of answer that question for you, I do expect him, if things don't work there, that they roll him out to the X or the Y. That's just kind of something that I think they're willing to play with because we don't have that true backup to Omari Kelly, maybe outside of Javonte Sherman. So his role is, I think when you describe it as hybrid, that's what it's going to be. He's a guy that is not comfortable blocking, so he's not really great at masking what you're doing on the offensive side. You know that if he's there, he's probably more than likely just going to be a chip blocker. Or you're not going to run to his side in the risk of getting him hurt. That's a very amateur way to look at it, but that's my synopsis on it. He's a pass catcher first and a blocker second. We've got guys like TK Sudurath, who actually caught a touchdown of the spring game, very physical back. He's a guy that I kind of like a lot that could mask that a lot better, if you will. I'm a Titans fan, so I like more of a Delaney Walker type of guy who can do both sides of the tight end position, and he fits the bill there. Holden is just kind of more of your, I keep going back to him, but he's kind of a hybrid type.
Did he play any in line in the spring, or was he kind of always kind of like out wide in the slot?
No, he did play in line a little bit. Like I said, when they ran a 12 personnel, he was actually the H, so he had some opportunities to see him everywhere. And I don't know, again, if that's their they want to just test him out and see where he's comfortable and see what kind of sets there, or see what kind of patterns they can get out of him running with his finger in the dirt. But it's still tough to say what Bodie Reeder wants to do. And I don't know if that's him testing himself or he's just trying to keep the film limited. I'm not entirely sure, but I think Holden will still be a big contributor to the offense just because he has sure hands and he's got a big frame.
The talking about lost production, the offensive line took a hit this offseason as well, losing 4 of 5 starters as well as a top backup. What did they kind of do this offseason to shore that lineup, and how did they look this spring?
They did they hit the transfer portal very hard, and it did a great job. Mason did a great job in regards to bolstering up that line. As I've already talked about how little the line has been in years past. And I'll go through some of these names. We got transfers like Ellis Adams for Tennessee Tech, 6'4", 376. That's not a typo. He's 376 pounds. You got Shamar Crawford, 6'5", 296. Ethan Ellis, 6'6", 316. Demella Knox, 6'7", 311. And then we just got the news of 6'4", 295, Marcus Miller from UNLV, who just committed from the transfer portal. So that's 5 guys. Now, unfortunately, most of those guys are going to be the tackle position. Marcus Miller from UNLV actually is an interior lineman, which is good news for us because that's kind of the area that we still have question marks as far as depth pieces go. But when you go through those guys, you're looking at 6'5 plus. Everyone's over 280 pounds. So that's something that we're just not used to seeing. And you got some guys that are over 350 pounds. It's incredible. So we've lost a lot of pieces, yes. And sometimes that can definitely hurt an offense. But sometimes when you bring in an entirely new squad, it could also be good news for you. Sure. They're all learning the same system at the same pace. No one has more experience than the other in the MTSU offense. So there's a lot of battles as far as who's going to get the starting position on the outside tackles. You also have Mateo Guevara, who is a returning sophomore, who was on the All-Conference USA All-Conference freshman team last year, who's going to get his time as well. So there's a battle at the tackle position, but one thing that is just refreshing is the size. And I think when we go into our non-conference games against Duke and Ole Miss, we're not going to be overshadowed by those guys. We actually have the frames to kind of match the SEC lines.
So if you had to pick an offensive player to have a breakout season in 2024, who would that be?
I think the obvious answer is Omari Kelly. I think he's going to be your breakout player just because his production at Auburn wasn't there. One guy I purposefully left off when we were talking about wide receivers is Cameron Lacey. He's a redshirt freshman from Toccoa Falls, Georgia. One guy that is on no one's radar, and that's why I think he is a guy that if he gets the development that we're looking for over the summer, he's a guy that you could really see pop up on G5 radars. Very slippery type. That's kind of the best way I can describe him. And we saw a lot of that in the spring game. He has 3 catches for 50 yards. He actually, he slipped for a post route there in the spring game, and it would have been a 50-yard touchdown, but Roman was kind of seeking some pressure, wasn't able to get off his back foot and throw a 50-yard missile. Who can blame him? But he's a guy that is very slippery. He's a guy that can get loose and just get lost. He's a very small frame. I think he's listed at 5'8", 170 pounds. So he reminds me a lot of Richie James when he came through MTSU. But he's a guy that, like I said, he would play the slot partnered with someone like Omari Kelly that could be dangerous, and he could potentially rack up a lot of catches just by virtue of being the underneath to Omari Kelly. So I like him a lot. I think that if we see the development there, you've got a really good 1-2 spearheaded dragon there in regards to the passing game.
Moving over to the defensive side of the ball, and just like the offense, there's also a new leader there with defensive coordinator Brian Stewart, who is most recently the defensive coordinator of the XFL's Houston Roughnecks. What can you tell us about the type of scheme that Coach Stewart plans to run at Middle Tennessee?
Yeah, highly successful Brian Stewart. He had a stint with the Cowboys. One of the more successful years of the Dallas Cowboys, that is too. So I'm really excited about the news of having Stewart added to the coaching staff. He's a guy that's going to bring a ton of experience to a really inexperienced defensive side of the ball that we have this year. One thing that we have picked up on is the fact that it's always best man up. He's not going to play favorites. We've got a lot of P5 transfer in the secondary, and he mixed a lot of them in the spring game. So I know that as we preview the season here, you kind of want me to tell you who is who and where they're going to be playing. But one thing that I can't for sure tell you is what things look like now at the end of April. This comes out early May, and where things will be when we kick off in August and September. I think that's something that Brian Stewart's willfully playing around with, and I know that that's something that they're going to target pretty heavily in the transfer portal, is finding depth pieces for their up front seven. But for him, he's looking for physical guys. Size doesn't matter for the most part. It's about the guy that's willing to put his head in and get to work. And we see that evidenced by, again, giving so many guys the opportunity this spring.
What would you say like the base scheme is? Is it 4-3, 3-3-5, 3-4?
He's got 3 down linemen. Yeah, for the most part, I would say a 3-3-5 because we do utilize the nickel quite a bit. So I'm not huge on the defensive side of the ball, but if I had to put something to it, I'd say a 3-3-5. But it's kind of a multiple scheme. I know we've seen some sets with 4 down linemen, 3 down linemen. So again, it may be back to what we were just talking about. It may be a mixture of personnel.
Might be dictated by the personnel.
Right.
Right. All right, so let's talk about those guys up front. If there's 3 down linemen, they do lose Quindarius Dunnigan and Jordan Branch and Marley Cook and Zayden Wood. They do return James Stewart, DeMonte Smith, Brandon Buckner, and others. They also bring in Felix Hickson from South Carolina, one of those P5 guys that you're talking about. How did that unit look this spring, and did anybody stand out?
Yeah, the front there is got a lot of rebuilding to do. That was kind of our area that we were our strongest last season, and we were kind of hoping. Well, when Stockstill left, you know guys are going to enter the portal, but those guys left almost immediately, and it kind of hurt because you know that whoever we didn't know Mason wasn't on any of our radars, but I would like to think that had they known that a guy like Derek Mason, who's very defensive heavy, would have probably stayed at benefit, but. A lot of those guys moved on to SEC schools, so I can't blame them for getting those opportunities. But that was an area. The front line was an area that we are really hurting for right now. As far as that front seven goes, and you mentioned some of those guys. It's just they're rolling through so many. The only guy that really stood out in regards to like the production that's going to return is going to be Parker Hughes, Devin Curtis. Those are guys that have tons of, and Drew Francis as another guy. Those guys have a lot of minutes played, and they actually stuck around to kind of see what played out of the head coaching position. So we're very thankful for that. But the front seven is such a mix, and I know that there's just no. I couldn't even begin to tell you where they stand on the depth chart right now.
That might be pretty good because you've got to have that offensive line depth and defensive line depth, and if you're constantly rotating to figure out what you got, well, you might luck into just having really good depth.
Right. And you touch on it. Another byproduct is just the amount of reps you're getting, right? If everyone's getting 1 reps, we're all getting quality reps, right? And the size of the offensive line, I think that Mason has touched on in press conferences past, is you're going up against these big fellas, right? Like that's got to count for something at the end of the day. You can go against your scout team, but when you're going up against guys that are 375 pounds in practice every day, like you're going to get better. And so is he, for that matter.
You kind of touched on the linebacker group there. You do lose leading tackler Sam Brumfield, who's off to Virginia Tech, and then Jonathan Butler graduates. But some of the guys that you mentioned, as far as returning production, Parker Hughes, Devin Curtis, Drew Francis. Did anyone kind of step up to kind of fill that leadership role that Brumfield?
He's a tough guy to kind of replace for all the reasons you listed. He was a leader. He got a lot of he was a tackles leader. gosh, he just created turnovers. He's all over the field at once, and he was one that, again, really stung to see leave. To step up in that role, it's going to be guys like Hughes, like Curtis, who've been here for a while. That'll do that for you. They kind of know the way, they know the ropes of what it means to be MTSU Blue Raiders, or as Mason loves to call it, blue collar. They're from small schools. Well, Curtis is not. Curtis is from Brentwood Academy, a very large private school, but Hughes is from a very small school in East Tennessee. So he kind of understands what it takes to, one, get yourself out of your situation, get you into Division I level, and be a high performing linebacker at that. So those are kind of, if you're looking for the leadership type, those are your obvious choices, and they're going to be producers for you at the linebacker position. You got guys like James Stewart, who ended up getting 3 sacks over in the spring game. Granted, they're touch sacks, so take that for what it is. But you're getting quarterback pressure, and he's an undersized defensive end too. That you look for. If you put him in Conference USA, he's going to excel, much like we saw with Sam Brumfield. But Sam was able to get his no matter who he played. Alabama, Miami, he got his. So he's a guy that, again, he's a tough one to replace, but you're going to lean pretty heavily on those experienced players when they come back this year.
So another area that kind of lost a lot was that defensive backfield, losing Jacoby Thomas to Tennessee and Truff Flellan and Teldrick Ross to graduation. They did bring in Brendan Harris from Wake Forest and James Mons III from Indiana. They returned Terrell Raby and Dier McDonald and Marve Myers, I believe. Is that how you say it? Marve?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All right. Who stepped up in the spring, and how do we see these vacated roles get filled?
Yeah, they're a tough group, not only to scout but also to pronounce. But they're Ricky Smith is another one that's a transfer in from Purdue who's a safety. He's a guy that really showed out at the spring game. He's going to be the free safety for him. I would have to imagine he's kind of the number. He's going to be that guy. He's flying around making a lot of the stops. The other one is Brendan Harris, another safety. He's going to probably more than likely play the other safety position for him. It's all about finding where the cornerbacks, where they're going to fall, because you're losing all your production there. Safety is kind of always an area we've always been really good at. So it's surprising to see new. Yeah, if you know anything, you got Kevin Byard, Trey
Blankenship.
Yeah, Reed Blankenship. You got Trey Flellan, who just coming off an ACL. Didn't get drafted. He was on some people with potential. As of now, we still don't have any news on him being undrafted, but he's coming off an ACL surgery, so it'll be a tough sell. But he's a guy that was on some NFL draft boards for a while before the injury. But back to the cornerback discussion, you've got James Mond. I liked him a lot. He played the nickel in the spring game. He's a guy that has got a pass breakup. He rushed off the edge. He's a guy that's very quick. I like his game a lot. I look forward to seeing him. You got Tyrell Raby, who's got a lot of experience. Diari McDonald, he's a guy from Cincinnati as well. He's kind of played more of the outside linebacker position, also could play the nickel. Not necessarily the fast type that was going to be able to stick around with your slot receivers, but he gives you that size and that speed that you do need in the outside linebacker position to also defend the run really well. So as far as, again, where their heads are at, we've already seen some cornerbacks actually hit the portal. More of your depth pieces hit the portal. I think they're pretty set on who their 5 secondary players are going to be, but I still think he's willing to play around with them a little bit. But you've got a lot of guys that have Power 5 experience that look really good in our spring game, and hopefully they'll be big contributors in the secondary, because that's something that has always been MTSU's strength is our secondary.
If you had to pick a defensive player to kind of have a breakout season in 2024, who do you think that might be?
Man, I wish I really could give you a solid answer on something I feel confident about. I do think Ricky Smith, the transfer in from Purdue, would be my number one choice. He has the Power 5 experience. He played a lot at Purdue. I think he's going to have the opportunity to create a lot of turnovers. And again, I think I give him benefit of the doubt just playing the safety position. It's weird because the coaching staff is entirely different. So it's hard to say that MTSU is really good at the safety position, but in the same breath admit that you have an entirely different coaching staff. So right. You don't know exactly where he's going to fall, but I like Ricky Smith. He has all the intangibles to be a really good safety in Conference USA, and it's a pretty pass heavy league. So he's going to be in the action, but unfortunately for him and a lot of the secondary guys, it's kind of a sink or swim kind of conference. Like I said, teams are going to throw 400 yards a night. it's just a virtue of the Conference USA offensive style. So they're going to get put on islands, but I would anticipate a lot of them are going to get rotated through. But Ricky Smith, I think, is going to be a mainstay at free safety.
With spring practice now over, which position group or groups do you feel is the most concerning?
Yeah, the front seven, definitely the front seven. And I would say the linebackers feel pretty safe just because of the experience, but most of your linebackers, they're not going to play every single snap. So the depth pieces have got to be there. So the transfer portal is something that I know that we're looking to hit heavy as we get into that summer period. And Mason's alluded to that a lot, is that it's all about getting those 2s and 3s. He feels good about most of his 1s. He's not really looking to pick up any starters in the portal, but he's looking to pick up those depth pieces. So if there was an area that concerns me, it's that front seven, because it was so good last year and you're getting all these new faces in and limited playing experience. So that's an area that I hope does well. I think we saw pretty good promise in what they were capable of doing in the spring game, but that's an area that I would, if I had to pick one, that would be the front seven or the defensive line, to be more specific.
Well, we talked about where you're most concerned. Let's talk about the positive. What do you think is the biggest strength of this team in 2024?
I would say really, if I could be more broad, it would be the offense. I think it's such a strong offense. You've got Vadiato, who has so much experience in the Conference USA level. He just brings a level of poise to him that I think is unmatched in Conference USA. I really think he's going to have a special year. I know that's a really easy pick, is to say your quarterback is your best, but it's true. He's going to come in with the most minutes played of any player on roster. He's going to be the X factor for you. Obviously, if he stays healthy, I mean, there's no telling what kind of numbers he could put up. But the offense, I go back to Amari Kelly. It's another guy that could be an X factor for you. The run game collectively as a committee could be really good, and this new look offensive line is going to change what most people think about MTSU in regards to having a big physical presence up front. So the offense collectively, if you need me to give you an answer, I would say Vadiato.
That offensive line, some offensive lines click a little bit better with run game or pass protection. This offensive line, do you think it's going to be more of that pass protection to give Vadiato more time to throw and get the ball down the field, or is it going to be kind of a little bit more of that ground and pound?
I think one thing, by virtue of the game just transforming at all levels, like in high school, you used to see a lot more of a multiple offense where guys are going to run a lot 50-50 with the pass. And even those that come from small schools are going to run a ton. And then when they get into college, they're kind of set up in more of an air raid offense. That's just kind of virtue of the game. So I say that I think by nature, guys are trained to be really good pass protectors nowadays. They don't focus on much of the inside zone. You're just not going to find, and to be non-offensive to any high school coaches out there, but that's just not really their style. They don't focus a lot on the inside zone run games or outside zone run games as much as they used to. Now it's about how far can I get my quarterback to throw the ball downfield, and how my fastest receiver can he go down there and catch it. So by virtue of a lot of these guys having inexperience, they're going to be set up well to be good pass protectors, and that's going to serve us well with Vadiato and the style that Bodie Reeder wants to play. Buy time, get his tight ends the opportunity to get open. But I do think that given their size and the fact that by virtue of having a little bit smaller on the interior side of the line, the run game could be dangerous. And I think that they could get a rhythm. I think that if Bodie Reeder finds some magic in the run game, he's not scared to continue to run the football. That's one thing that I think has hindered MTSU in the past, is that we were so married to the pass game that when it wasn't working, we would, we'd settle for a field goal on the 5-yard line because we didn't know how to run the ball. I couldn't tell you, not to get on my soapbox here, but I couldn't tell you how many times we'd go 1st and goal on the 4-yard line and we'd have to kick a field goal because we didn't know how to run the football 3 straight times to get 4 yards. So I know that was way off what you're asking, but I think that it's all about rhythm, and the offensive line. I think it's, again, whatever the hot hand is, because Peasant and Credle can run the ball really well. If the ball is moving on the ground, I think Bodie Reeder has enough experience to know that you just keep going with the hot hand, and if that's running the ball, that's what you got to do.
And then we talked a little bit about the transfer portal. So when it comes to recruitment of new players, and now just the retention of existing players that are on your team, how has NIL and the transfer portal impacted Middle Tennessee?
To put it, I would say middling, and I mean that pun intended, because we're just kind of a middle of the pack. I don't know that MTSU is on the forefront in regards to NIL and recruiting and retention. I think one thing that's helped tremendously is the construction of the $66 million student athlete performance center I already touched on. It's not going to be completed until the end of next school spring semester. So it'll be 2025 season that you'll kind of get to see the full erection of all that. But that gets those kids excited. But who's to say that gets any, when SEC schools are offering me money, is my indoor facility really going to keep me around? I can't make that promise to those guys. But for them, I think it's a big deal. It helps a ton. NIL is kind of something that MTSU I still think is maybe a half year behind on, because it's something that we saw with Liberty, who has this exponential amount of funds being a private institution and a lot of backers, and what they were capable of doing this last year. And you would love to replicate something like that at a public university, but it's hard. But where is something that you can improve? Well, the facilities. And I think that they finally are putting the money where their mouth is in regards to that forefront. And I don't know that it's helping keep the kids, but it certainly is helping with recruiting, and it's going to help with the development of these kids. And now that you're getting a coach in here like Derek Mason, who has SEC coach experience, he understands what it takes on a daily basis to get these guys prepared. And not that Stockstill didn't, but Stockstill never had to be quite honest, he never had to perform much like someone like Mason does. When the SEC, it's a, what have you done for me lately? Stockstill was very complacent, 20 years at your job, and your coaching record is barely over 500. So Mason, he's a big advocate too for the NIL, and he's a big reason I think any kid would choose MTSU over anything else. I think kids nowadays they commit to outside of the NIL, they'll commit to a coach. And Mason's a really lovable guy. The kids love him. I think he's really easy to work with. He's really easy to talk to. He would stop and talk to you for hours if you ever caught him. So I think that's something that accounts for the recruiting ability or the salesmanship of MTSU by Mason.
Speaking of Mason, and it sounds like he's kind of doing all these roles, like with the NIL transfer portal. You kind of see the head coach really being more of a GM per se than a head coach. They gotta they gotta do recruiting. They gotta worry about player retention and player personnel, fundraising, and then maybe they're not as involved in the X's and O's anymore. Or sometimes some schools they hire an assistant or a grad assistant just to basically be in charge of player personnel, if you will. Kind of how is Middle Tennessee handling that? Is Mason kind of doing it all, or does he have different guys kind of helping him on staff? Or
You put it well when you said general manager. We had him on my podcast back in February, right after the spring signing period, and the way he put it was that he's the CEO of MTSU football. Those are his words, not mine, and I think that's a good way of putting it. He understands what football means not only to MTSU, but what football means to the landscape of college athletics and how competitive the university is on all fronts, all athletics. I mean, if football is doing well, there's a good chance basketball is doing well too. You know what I mean? And so he understands that responsibility and what that means. It was in regards to the X's and O's. He's also said too that he's hired the guys for a reason. He hired Bodie Reeder to be his offensive coordinator to make those calls. He's hired Brian Stewart to be his defensive coordinator to make those calls. He'll as much defensive coordinating as he's done in his lifetime, he'll say Brian Stewart has still got me beat. It wouldn't matter. So I think that he's accepted the role of a general manager, as you put it, where it's more about personnel, player evaluation, player development, more so than it is about the game day side of things. Sure, he's going to be a game manager. He's going to call the timeouts. He's going to be the clock management kind of guy, but he's accepted the role of I need to help MTSU is in regards to the revenue side of things. He's doing everything he can. He's got ideas coming out of his ears in regards to ways to fundraise for the MTSU and that student athlete performance center, and what more can he do for the university. He's all about what more can I do for the university? What do I have to do? And he's willing to pick up a shovel and do things himself. So I admire that a lot about Derek Mason, because he's a guy that could come in with SEC experience and say he's too good for that. But he is really he's worn the blue collar moniker very well, and he's represented MTSU well. And again, to kind of back up what you're saying there, Justice, he's just kind of he's a guy that he's a general manager, and that's his role, and he knows it's his role without having to be told that.
All right, Jake. The dust is settled. 2024 is done. What does success look like for Middle Tennessee State here in 2024?
Is doing what Liberty did. Is that a legitimate answer here?
It is. That's a high bar of success, but yes.
No, I'll come back down to earth just a little bit. But when you talk to Mason, he'll make you think that that's possible,
Yeah,
and
I
you
mean,
like
it certainly is, right?
Yeah, you like that. And to be quite honest, I think realistically, if we won 5 games, I know that doesn't sound like great, but I think 5 wins. If you told me we'd win 5 wins before we got Mason, I'd be pretty happy with the roster that we're returning. 5 wins is kind of the bar. I think most people, hearing from what MTSU fans, to answer your question, what is success? 5 wins. We feel good about that. Most of the fans are like 5 wins. He gets to keep his job next year, right? 6 wins, I think, is more realistic. I do think when you look at the roster, he has a tough non-conference in his first year. Other than the Tennessee Tech game to open up, you've got Memphis, you got Duke, you got Ole Miss, not in that order, but you got those 3 right out the boot, and then you got Western Kentucky in the middle of all those. So outside of your opening game win against Tennessee Tech, you've got 4 games that very easily could be losses. So you're staring on the barrel 1-4 right out the gate. So it's hard to put him and say you've got to win 6, because after that point, he's got to win 5 of the last 7 ball games to make a bowl game. And Conference USA is shuffled a lot. New Mexico State's not who they are. Liberty is still going to be a top contender. Western Kentucky is going to be a top contender. It's where do the other 7 of us fall? And if he can be on the better half of those 7, I would feel pretty good about it. I think, again, success for us would be 5 wins. If he can get us to a bowl game, that's great. Preferably something on the mainland. We're tired of going to the Bahamas or Hawaii, or I should say I'm tired of not being able to go to Hawaii or Bahamas because the team gets to go, but I don't get to go. So, but and the last time we were in mainland, we won a bowl game. So I think that's important too. But I think 5 wins is realistic. 6 would be a great year for him.
Well, we've kind of, covered all our bases here, but is there anything else that you think we should know about this 2024 Blue Raiders football team?
Nothing really. I feel like we did a great job covering all the bases. I think the big thing is keeping an eye out for Mason in that first year. I've said this since the day we hired him. Look for him to get picked up. I mean, he's going to do a great job here at Vanderbilt. It's a tough place to win. It's probably arguably the hardest place to win in Division I football. So, he still had a level of success there. So if he was able to have even a slight little inkling of success, reminiscent of James Franklin, I think he's going to do great here. He's on a 5-year contract. I don't anticipate him finishing that contract, just to be openly honest, but I'm excited to see where he can take MTSU in these next 5 seasons.
Well, the positive thing, like you said, if he doesn't finish the contract, I mean, it's probably most likely, I would assume, because he did so well. So that's a positive in and of itself.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's kind of where, again, I think we would be trending up. If we can get 6 this year, then you're looking at 7, 8, 9. The non-conference is always a big part of a team's success. And when you're looking at the total of wins, and Lord knows MTSU could use the money. Unfortunately, we have to get a beating by Alabama and Ole Miss every 3-4 years. But, sometimes you can get a good non-conference schedule set place with someone like Marshall, for that matter. That's always a rivalry that people want to kind of rekindle. Stuff like that, but that's all other talk. But I think that his success, it would warrant him moving on, and I think MTSU would be better off for it.
Well, thank you again, Jake, for sharing your time and knowledge with us today. If you are watching on YouTube, again, please hit that like and subscribe button. And if you're listening to us in podcast form, please rate and review. Again, 5 stars only, please. All right. Thank you for all of your support. And until next time, we are the G5 Hive.